Now on Mississippi Insight. Jackson Mayor John Horhn lays out his plan to repair roads, revive neighborhoods, and restore trust in City Hall. We'll break down what it means for the capital city and hear from Natchez Mayor Dan Gibson on his proposals for curbing gun violence statewide. That's all ahead this week on Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us for this October 26th edition of Insight. Jackson Mayor John Horhn says the capital city is ready to move forward together. He delivered his first State of the City address to a large crowd at the Mississippi Museum of Art. The mayor highlighted street repairs, new cleanup equipment, and the search for a new police chief. Here's Mayor Horhn speaking Monday.
We have to meet the opportunity with the individual and help them make the connection that, yes, you can do this. You can see yourself as a diesel mechanic, as a data technician, a plumber, an electrician, a cable splicer, a builder, or an entrepreneur. Jackson needs skilled hands and sharp minds. On infrastructure, we have amassed a total of at least $125 million that's been secured to resurface Jackson's roads and neighborhoods, coming from the 1 cent sales tax, special funds, and bonds. Of that, we have $75 million that we've gotten from the Federal Highway Administration that will be devoted to resurfacing our streets and clearing out storm drains. You can tell for potholes. Today, Public Works is actively managing 35 capital improvement projects that touch nearly every part of the daily life of Jackson, from repairing sidewalks and drainage systems to upgrading street lighting and traffic signals. So far, we have worked through over 325 cases of blight elimination just in this past quarter. Every step brings us closer to neighborhoods where people feel proud to live. I believe it's time we reimagine our vacant and dilapidated spaces as opportunities. Instead of empty lots and overgrown corners, we can create new green spaces, vibrant urban farms, places that bring life back into our neighborhoods, provide fresh food options, and turn blight into beauty for the people of Jackson. We launched a Clean Jackson Gateway Beautification Day to revitalize key entrances and gateways into our city. That Beautification Day focused on cleaning up several high-traffic corridors, including West Capitol Street, Woodrow Wilson, Fortification, High Street, Pearl Street, and Pascagoula Street. Volunteers joined forces to remove trash and debris, contributing to a more welcoming and attractive environment for residents and visitors. The department recently secured $1.4 million in new equipment funding to strengthen our citywide cleanup efforts, accelerate blight removal, and improve the way we serve our neighborhoods. I want to thank and recognize the men and women of our first responders, our firefighters, our police officers. They stand in the gap for us. They do the hard work, they do the dangerous work, and public safety is always at the foundation of a great city. The Jackson Fire Department led more than 65 community programs, installed new smoke alarms in homes, formed a behavioral health partnership that supports our firefighters. The Fire Marshal's Office inspected over 1,500 businesses. We've held 3 citizen fire academies so people could see the service and commitment of our team. And thanks to CCID's advisory board, they gave us $2 million to establish an early alert warning system for better fire safety. We are currently conducting a nationwide search for a new chief of police. I appointed former chief of the Mississippi Highway Patrol, Colonel Charles Haynes, and former U.S. Marshal George White, my buddy I've known since the 6th grade, by the way, to lead our police chief search committee that's helping to conduct a nationwide search for a new chief. Now, that is not to say that we're closing the door on any local applicants, any regional applicants, but we're also not shutting the door on finding the best possible police chief we can find, no matter where they emanate from. As I mentioned at the start of this search, I projected a 60 to 90-day window to make a selection. At the time, that seemed reasonable. But as we opened this process to the community, held listening sessions, and sat down with officers and residents, it became clear that time isn't the measure that matters most. The process is. What counts is getting this decision right, not getting it fast. We're listening to every voice, weighing every perspective, and moving carefully because this role carries real weight for our city's future. This is a responsible way to lead. We want to legitimize this position for the long term by making sure every step is taken. Last year, at this time, we had 89 homicides. Today is 51. And while that is a 43% decrease, even one death is one death too many. We have to change the narrative for our young people, or we're going to lose them. And I, for one, don't want to lose them. We cannot police our way out of the problems of youth crime. There are alternatives. There must be alternatives. And in some cases, there's a need for counseling. In others, it may require workforce training. But we've got to do something to change the narrative of our young people who may be going down the wrong path. But we also need sworn officers on the streets. We need better equipment, more technology for our law enforcement. My administration's goal is to become a model for the use of equipment and technology in public safety. We're working with philanthropists and other benefactors to try to accomplish this goal. As of yesterday, we've hosted 7 listening sessions throughout the city. It's the first time a mayor has sought direct input from citizens on what leadership qualities they want to see in their next chief. You're the ones who know what matters most in policing. You live it every day. So please, if you haven't had input or been able to provide input, visit jacksonms.gov/survey to provide feedback. Help us define the priorities and qualities we need in the next leader of our police department.
That's Jackson Mayor John Horhn. After the break, we'll get analysis of his speech with Russ Latino. Mississippi Insight returns in a moment. Jackson's mayor laid out an optimistic plan for the city's recovery. But what will it take to turn promise into progress? For analysis, 12 News' Tom Wright talked with Magnolia Tribune's Russ Latino to discuss key takeaways.
Okay, you listen to the address. Top priorities, of course, for this administration are very familiar. We are talking about public safety. We are talking about infrastructure and blight removal. Do you feel any more optimistic at this time that we are finally ready as a city and our leaders are ready to address this in real productive ways?
I would say that I feel more optimistic right now than I've felt in a very long time that Jackson has a leadership structure in place that is being serious about those issues, that is doing the hard work to understand what Jackson citizens think. I know Mayor Horhn talked a lot about the listening sessions that they're doing and the importance of that. Clearly, he's also leaning on other leaders and experts, whether you're talking about the homeless task force or some of the other sort of infrastructure initiatives that he announced during the course of the State of the City. So the short answer is yes, I feel more optimistic than I did during Mayor Lumumba's tenure in office, certainly, and even before that. That doesn't mean that I'm entirely optimistic that all of it can get done, right, or that all of it gets done perfectly well.
Sure.
When I say that I'm not entirely optimistic, that's not a reflection on Mayor Horhn. A lot of people have had good intentions around those spaces and those issue areas. And to your point, it is a tall task. It's something that has taken decades to get us into the situations that we're in, whether you're talking about public safety or infrastructure or housing. And so, again, it's not a reflection on him so much as a recognition of the size of the challenge that's facing him. With respect to housing, I thought he made a really good point about sort of how Jackson has downsized over the years. And you know the history very well, Tom, but beginning in the 1960s, you started to see urban sprawl and people move out of Jackson. That trend has never really abated. So it's been going on for a number of decades. And Mayor Horn made the point that the city is really built for 250,000 residents, but has about 150,000 residents living in Jackson proper. And so that's a significant decline in the number of people, which means that the footprint of the city itself has left a lot of vacancies, a lot of blighted property and whatnot. I think, the legislature did something interesting last year, Tom. They created additional tax incentives for people to take over blighted property. And, the state of the city was not super specific about what this homeless task force was going to do, how they were going to solve the housing problem. It just sort of laid out that marker and announced the development of the task force. I do wonder, though, if some of the recipe for addressing that issue is to figure out how to use the blighted property that already exists and how to use some of the incentives that were created by the legislature to get people in to the city of Jackson, purchasing those properties, fixing them up, and then ultimately providing what would be low-income housing that could be helpful in that situation.
All right. You bring up the legislature. Mayor Horn made a point to emphasize collaboration with state and federal leadership, and even went so far as to thank Governor Reeves. We didn't hear that very often in the Lumumba administration as of late. But do you see this? Do you see Mayor Horn and his election and the beginning of his administration as that turning point finally in state-city relations, or is it just more theater at this moment?
No, I mean, I will tell you that every Republican legislator that I've talked to about Jackson is hopeful. A lot of those folks have trust in what was Senator Horn, now Mayor Horn, having worked with him for a number of years. Certainly when I was working in the Capitol, I can tell you that he was somebody that was respected on both sides of the aisle, and someone who was seen as not being, and I mean this in a positive way in the context of municipal government, not being hyper ideological, but pragmatic in his ability to work with lots of different people from different points of view. And I think that will aid the city of Jackson in a tremendous way, developing relationships or bringing in relationships really that have not existed for quite some time. So I see that as a legitimate plus and perk for the city. It still is an issue, though, that, if you're a Republican or even a Democratic legislator in another part of the state, and you see your own problems. We've talked a lot about Jackson Water. Yeah. There are a whole bunch of water systems across the state that are equally bad. Holly Springs come to mind as a place that needs a lot of work. And so if you're a senator or representative from one of those communities, I think it's a hard sell to say, hey, we need to give special attention to Jackson and not to your community. But if anybody is in a position to make that sell, I think it is Mayor Horn.
A series of mass shootings a couple of weekends ago prompted an emotional opinion column from Natchez Mayor Dan Gibson. We asked the mayor to come on our streaming podcast In the Know to explain his proposals for state lawmakers.
Well, I don't know that it's a medical term that you can Google, but it may be Googled at some point if we get more word out there. We are suffering from 80%itis across our state. That means 80% of violent crime is happening from repeat, and in some cases, repeat offenders. And I am not exaggerating. We have had cases here where time and time again, it goes back to the same suspects. In fact, our police here tell me that in most crimes, they know the suspects already and know them by name and by nickname because they're so familiar to them, because it's in the court, out of the court, in the court, out of the court. Well, I thought this was just a problem we were having. I started talking to mayors, and I'm finding out, and I just won't name the mayors and the cities, but I will tell you, it is in various areas of the state, both Republican, Democrat. It is a problem. It's not Republican, Democrat. It's not black, white. It's not red, blue. It is affecting all of us. And if people don't feel safe, they're going to leave, and we're going to see our population decline. Now, let me talk about 80%itis. I believe that we have been treating symptoms, and we are not treating the root cause. We can treat symptoms all day, but until we actually find that we are putting the criminals away and then we are having them stay away, then, until that point, we're not going to be safe. And we can do all we can. But right now, we have a system in Mississippi where bond guidelines are set by a rule under the rules of criminal procedure. These are set by the Supreme Court. A lot of people don't know this. The legislature, I thought, until recently set the bonds. That is not true. It is set by the Supreme Court through their criminal procedures, through their judicial procedures. Do you know that nowhere in the bonding procedures do we find that they even mention Mississippi's Victims' Bill of Rights? More and more, we are finding that all of the attention and concern seems to go to the accused. And they also have, and it's even in our law, that bonds are not meant to keep people in jail. They are only meant to make sure people show up for their trials. Well, that may be fine in nonviolent situations, but when we're dealing with violent crime, first and foremost, we should be concerned about the victim and the safety of the victim or the victim's family in the cases where the victim is deceased. And this needs to become a part of the bond guidelines. In addition to that, Byron, what we are finding is that the bonds are ridiculously low. Did you know that you can commit murder in this state, and if you get the right judge, you just might get a bond as low as $25,000? Well, do the math. You can then post 10%. That's $2,500. $2,500 for murder? And then take that one step further. We're finding that bail bondsmen in Mississippi are allowed to finance these bonds. And we know that it takes a long time for these trials to go to court. It may take a year. It may take 2 years. It may take 3 years. And in that time, someone can be out on a murder charge, bonded out, paying as little as $100 every couple of weeks to a bond agent. I think that is criminal. And I think the fact that we have a system that is allowing that is criminal. And that is going to absolutely perpetuate this problem.
So you'd like to see the bonds increase to what level? And at the same time, some people may argue that if you increase the bonds, you're hurting those less fortunate, and those who have more money could bond out, and it would just hurt those who are poor.
We have seen cases where those who are accused of murder, attempted murder, are able to post bonds regardless of the amount, because some of them deal in a cash business. And we all know that we have a cash business in certain areas of our communities involving drugs. That's just one example. But I don't think that in nonviolent crimes, we need necessarily just to be holding people for very large bond amounts just for the sake of doing it. Our prisons are crowded enough. But when we have a violent situation and we have someone who is a known repeat offender, then we need to make sure that those bonds are above an amount where $2,500 will spring you, where $100 a week or $100 every 2 weeks to a bond agent will get you out of jail. I was at a meeting of the Mississippi Municipal League. I was talking to an individual who is now a police chief in North Mississippi. He is a former sheriff. He is also a former retired member of the Mississippi Highway Patrol. He said, the problem with gun violence is that it is always 9 cases out of 10 going to be repeat offenders. People don't start at guns. They work their way up to guns. They get away with one thing, they get away with another. Next thing you know, they're graduating to guns. And what we're finding is most of the gun violence we're having in this state are young people. So in other words, they're getting away with crime from an early age, and it's just compounding until we have what we have had in the headlines recently.
If you have comments or questions about today's show or a suggestion for an interview or segment, just drop us a line. Email our producers. The address is news@wjtv.com. Thanks to Russ Latino and Mayor Dan Gibson for their insights this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.